You might believe that simply being good is enough to make it in this world, that showing up, playing fair, and keeping your head down will protect you from the chaos surrounding you. But take a moment and really look. See who gets crushed, who's ignored, who falls apart the instant they show vulnerability. It's not the cruel or the arrogant who suffer. It's the gentle, the kind-hearted, the empathetic ones who expect the world to return their kindness. Machiavelli put it bluntly, if you're not ruthless, you're not ready. When the world inevitably comes for you, you'll either break or become ruthless. That's the choice, that's the battle, and it's already underway. Most people never realize they're facing this choice because it doesn't feel like one. It feels like betrayal. The first time someone exploits your silence, the first time your kindness is mistaken for weakness, the first time you wonder how someone could hurt you after all you've done. Slowly, it gnaws at you. The quiet voice that whispers, maybe you're the fool, maybe your goodness is costing you everything. But instead of listening, you push harder. You try to be even more gentle, more forgiving, hoping that if you prove your worth enough, someone, anyone, will finally treat you right. Yet the world doesn't reward purity, it rewards power. And power, as Machiavelli said, isn't T about how much love you can gather. It's S about how much pain you can endure without losing your hold. The powerful don't beg, they do not explain, and they do not allow anyone to define them by anything but their own strength. Because in a world that's constantly testing your boundaries, every time you let something slide, you're teaching people how to hurt you better next time. Now, here's the trap. Everyone wants to believe they're the exception, that they can be good and still be strong, that they can keep giving without running dry. And it works for a while until one day, you're the one staying up at night, trying to understand why people you helped are the same ones sabotaging you, why your loyalty is met with betrayal, why the people you defend are the ones who talk behind your back. You'll go through all the rational explanations. Maybe they're insecure, maybe they don't know better, maybe it's just a misunderstanding. But what you won't admit, what's too painful to accept, is that they did it because they could, because there was no consequence, because they didn't fear what you might do. Fear, that's a word no one wants to talk about. But fear is the silent currency of every relationship. Not terror, not cruelty, but the quiet, undeniable sense that crossing you comes with a price. And if you don't have that, if your presence doesn't carry weight, you'll spend your whole life being used, overlooked, and discarded the moment you're no longer convenient. People love to romanticize the idea that you can win people over with your heart alone. But even love without respect becomes pity, and pity is the slowest form of contempt. The moment you understand that, everything changes. You stop asking why people hurt you. You stop making excuses for their behavior. You stop begging the world to play fair. And you start doing what Machiavelli would demand, what reality demands. You stop living on hope, and you start building leverage. Leverage isn't loud. It's not about domination or control. It's about being undeniable, about knowing that you have something, strength, clarity, discipline, that people can't manipulate, that when someone tries to take from you, they'll regret it, that you're not afraid to walk away, that your silence isn't weakness, it's warning. But here's the uncomfortable truth. To build that kind of presence, you have to let parts of the parts that cling to being liked, the parts that want everyone to understand you, the parts that still believe that fairness will save you. You have to kill the illusion that people will change if you just love them harder. They won't. They change when they realize you won't tolerate being disrespected. And most people aren't ready to do that, because being ruthless, it comes with a cost. You'll be misunderstood, labeled cold, too intense, too distant. But that's the price of being unbreakable. See, being ruthless isn't about cruelty. It's about clarity, knowing what you will and will not accept, knowing when to walk away and when to strike, knowing that sometimes mercy is the weapon that gets you killed. And you won't learn this in books. You'll learn it the moment someone betrays you and still expects you to stay. You'll learn it when you finally say no and they look at you like you've committed a crime. Because people who are used to your self-sacrifice will always call your boundaries selfish. That's how you know you've drawn the line, right? Machiavelli didn't tell us to become monsters. He told us to become unshakable. To understand that if you want to navigate a world built on dominance, you can't show up as prey. You have to become the kind of person that doesn't flinch when things get ugly. The kind of person that can sit in the fire and not scream. The kind of person that doesn't chase closure, doesn't need apologies, doesn't need everyone to see their side. Because when you're truly ruthless, not out of hate but out of necessity, you don't need anyone to understand you. You only need them to know they can't break you. And that's where the shift begins, when you stop trying to be understood and start becoming undeniable, when your silence starts carrying more weight than someone else's shouting. When people start adjusting their tone the moment you walk in, not because you demanded it, but because your energy leaves no room for games. That's the Machiavellian way. Not noise, not drama, just presence. Presence built on control. And control built on knowing that at any given moment, you can burn the whole thing down and walk away without a second thought. But you can't fake this. You can't pretend to be ruthless. The world will test you. It'll poke, prod, insult, and reject you just to see if you fold. And if you do even once, even just a little, you confirm what they already suspect, that you're just like the rest, that your strength is performance, that your confidence is borrowed. But when you don't fold, when you meet insult with silence, betrayal with indifference, and pressure with precision, something strange happens. The same people who once doubted you begin to fear disappointing you. Not because you're cruel, but because you've shown them you don't need them. Needing nothing from anyone is the most dangerous position you can be in, because when you don't need, you can choose. You can walk away without hesitation. You can negotiate without begging. You can lead without asking for permission. And people feel that. They feel it the way animals sense an alpha. Something primal, something unspoken, something that can't be faked with words or titles. It's earned and it's felt in the smallest moments. A look, a pause, a refusal to react. This is the art of becoming ruthless. Not loud, not flashy, but deliberate. The kind of ruthlessness that doesn't destroy everything, just the illusions that make you weak. And once those illusions are gone, you begin to see the world exactly as it is. Not cruel, not fair, just real. And in that reality, everyone is playing a game, whether they admit it or not. Some play to survive, others play to dominate. But the ones who win, they play to outlast. And to outlast, you have to harden. Not just once, not just after one betrayal, but over and over again. Until your strength isn't a mask you wear, it's a skin you grow. It doesn't mean you stop feeling. It means your feelings no longer control your decisions. You still care, but with boundaries. You still love, but with discernment. And most importantly, you still give, but only to those who have earned it. That's the difference between the broken and the ruthless. The broken keep giving to prove they're good. The ruthless give because they choose to, not because they're afraid of being seen as bad. Machiavelli understood that power was never about being feared for no reason. It was about being respected because you could have chosen revenge but didn't. You could have destroyed someone but walked away instead. That kind of restraint, it terrifies people more than any threat because it proves you're not reacting, you're choosing. And anyone who chooses when others react owns the dynamic. But you can't get to that level if you're still flinching at rejection. If you're still explaining yourself to people who don't listen. If you're still trying to prove your worth to people who benefit from your self-doubt. The moment you realize that someone not valuing you isn't a problem, it's a filter. You begin to reclaim your power, not with revenge, but with removal. Silence becomes your new sharpest weapon. Distance your defense, detachment your armor. And the beauty of it all is how quiet it becomes. No dramatic confrontations, no last word victories, just the sound of you moving on. No announcement, no parade, just absence. A void that speaks louder than any argument ever could. And the world notices. Because in a culture addicted to validation and constant connection, the one who doesn't chase is the one who stands out. The one who walks away calmly from chaos without needing applause. That's the person people remember because they represent something rare. Power without noise, authority without arrogance, discipline without display. But there's a paradox here, and you need to hear this. The more ruthless you become, the more temptation you'll face to abandon your humanity altogether, to become cold for the sake of control. But that's not the goal. The goal is not to lose your heart. It's to protect it so deeply that only the deserving ever reach it. You don't want to become a monster. You want to become untouchable without losing your soul. And how do you do that? You keep your principles, but you stop announcing them. You set boundaries, but you enforce them quietly. You give trust, but in small doses, slowly watching everything. And you stop expecting people to treat you the way you treat them. That expectation is the root of so much suffering. Once you let go of it, you stop feeling betrayed by behavior that was predictable all along. You stop giving people the power to shock you. And when no one can shock you, no one can break you. Most people live in cycles of hope and disappointment. They enter relationships hoping to be seen, only to be hurt. They open up hoping to be understood, only to be rejected. And each time they shrink a little more, they either become bitter or they break. But you don't have to choose either. There's a third path. You become strategic. You start watching more than you speak, listening more than you explain. And instead of handing people the script to hurt you, you hand them nothing. Let them guess, let them project, let them underestimate. It's all leverage. Because the more unpredictable you become, the more powerful your presence gets. People don't fear those they fully understand. They fear the unknown, the unreadable, the unbothered. And when you carry yourself with that quiet, calculated distance, you become a mystery. Not by pretending to be someone else, but by finally stopping the habit of oversharing, over-justifying, and over-apologizing. You begin to realize that the less you explain, the more respect you command. Now, this isn't about playing games. It's about understanding them, so you're never a pawn again. Because life will test you through people. The ones who flatter you, the ones who challenge you, the ones who act like they love you until you say no. And every one of them teaches you a different lesson. How to hold your power, how to not be baited, how to keep your emotions yours, not theirs. And the more you master that, the less reactive you become. Your peace becomes sacred, your time expensive, and people start noticing that not everyone gets access to you. Not because you're cruel, but because you've paid the price for being too open, too soon, too often, and now you're done bleeding for people who don't bring bandages. You learn to observe a person's patterns, not their promises, their silences, not their speeches. You stop being impressed by potential and start paying attention to consistency. And slowly the world starts to look different, less like a battlefield and more like a board game. And you become a player who already knows how it ends because you're 10 moves ahead and you've already made peace with the idea of walking away if the game turns foolish. You don't flinch, you don't chase, you don't defend. You just remain unshaken, unreadable, and unmistakably in control. Because you've learned that power isn't just about what you can do. It's about what you can resist doing. It's about knowing your hand could destroy someone and choosing not to move it. That's where the fear comes from. That's where the respect grows. And it's not about being feared for your rage, it's about being feared for your silence, your discipline, your self-possession. That's what makes people question themselves before they question you. You either break or you build this version of you. The version that doesn't seek fairness, but creates balance. That doesn't demand loyalty, but observes it. That doesn't scream boundaries, but lives them. A version of you that doesn't need the world to be good anymore, because you've become strong enough to navigate it exactly as it is. And when you do, you become something the world doesn't know how to deal with. Someone who doesn't crumble under betrayal, someone who doesn't beg for closure, someone who doesn't lose their mind when things fall apart. Because you've already rebuilt yourself from worse. And now nothing can take that away from you. You either break or you become ruthless. And once you choose the latter, you never go back. Not because you're bitter, but because you finally know your worth. And you'll never again let the world decide it for you. And here's what no one tells you. Once you step into that ruthless version of yourself, everything starts to shift. The way people look at you, the way they speak to you, the way they hesitate before pushing your limits. They don't always understand what's changed, but they feel it. You're not louder, you're not meaner, you're just sharper, like a blade hidden under calm eyes, and people instinctively pull back from sharp things. That's presence. That's power. Because now you're not moving through life asking for anything. You're evaluating. Does this person bring clarity or confusion? Does this situation make you stronger or weaker? And if the answer leans toward chaos, you cut it off clean, quick, quiet, no guilt, No second chances, because you've learned something vital. Not everything deserves to stay just because it once made you feel good. Machiavelli would call this strategic cruelty, not in action, but in selection. Ruthlessness isn't only about how you deal with enemies. It's how you choose your allies, who you allow close, who gets to hear your fears, who gets to see your flaws. And if you're still letting anyone in just because they ask nicely, you haven't fully stepped into your power yet. Being ruthless means no one is grandfathered into your life. Not because you're cold, but because you've realized peace is more valuable than loyalty from the wrong people. You see, most people hold on to relationships because they're afraid of starting over. But you're no longer afraid of emptiness. You've made peace with solitude. You've sharpened yourself in the silence. And that makes you dangerous. Because a person who isn't afraid to be alone is a person you can't manipulate with loneliness. That's why the world tries so hard to keep you soft. It tells you that forgiveness makes you noble, that understanding everyone's pain makes you wise. And sure, those things have value until they start costing you your boundaries. Until they start turning you into a person who tolerates everything just to be seen as good. But there's nothing noble about letting people walk all over you. There's nothing wise about allowing repeated disrespect in the name of compassion. At some point, you have to stop confusing your capacity to endure pain with a badge of honor. Pain is not a currency, and if you keep treating it like one, you'll keep attracting people who expect you to pay in suffering. So, you make a new decision. No more over-explaining. No more begging to be understood. No more giving people 10 chances just because you're scared of looking too harsh. You cut through the noise. You state your boundaries once, and you let your actions enforce them. You don't teach people how to treat you with lectures. You teach them with consequences. And the moment someone realizes that crossing you isn't just unpleasant but unrewarding, they stop. And those who don't, they remove themselves. Not because you push them, but because they realize they can no longer extract what they used to. And that's perfect. Let them go. In fact, Machiavelli would say, let them believe they're leaving on their own terms. That's the art. Never force. Just make resistance so exhausting people choose submission over conflict. But don't mistake this for manipulation. This is psychological efficiency. It's the refusal to waste energy trying to convince anyone of anything. It's recognizing that not everyone deserves access to the full version of you. That sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is say nothing at all and let the silence do the talking. Because once people realize you're not emotionally dependent on them, they start showing their real face. The masks come off, the manipulation becomes obvious, and you get to make decisions not based on illusions but clarity. That's the benefit of being ruthless. You no longer fall for the performance. You see people exactly as they are and you adjust accordingly. And what you'll find is that your life begins to simplify drastically. You'll have fewer conversations, but they'll be real. Fewer relationships, but they'll be clean. Less drama, more movement, less noise, more precision. And the space that opens up, that's where your power lives. In the calm, in the calculated, in the control. Now, some people will try to shame you for this shift. They'll say you've changed, that you've become too cold, too distant, too serious. And they're right. You have changed. You had to because the person you used to be was drowning in chaos, in overthinking, in emotional labor that never got returned. You used to shrink to keep others comfortable. Now you take up space unapologetically. You used to bend until you broke. Now you let things snap before you even consider folding. And if that makes people uncomfortable, let them squirm. You're not here to be palatable, you're here to be powerful. You're not here to be soft enough to mold. You're here to be solid enough to stand. And the moment you own that truth fully, you stop living in defense. You stop anticipating who might misunderstand you, who might gossip about you, who might leave. You stop chasing safety and you start creating strategy. Because here's what you finally understand. People don't respect good intentions. They respect strong results. They don't follow the kindest, they follow the clearest. And if you're still trying to lead with softness in a world that respects strength first, you're setting yourself up to be eaten alive. But when you flip the script, when you lead with strength and then reveal your softness to the worthy, that's when everything shifts. Because now your compassion has weight. Now your kindness has boundaries. Now your yes means something because you're not afraid to say no. That's what real power looks like. It's not loud, it's not cruel, it's not performative. It's quiet, clear, unshakable. The kind of power that walks into a room and says nothing and yet somehow commands the entire atmosphere because people can feel it. They can feel that you don't need validation, that you don't need acceptance, that you've built yourself in silence, brick by painful brick. You either break or you build this fortress within. One thought, one rejection, one boundary at a time, until there's nothing left for the world to threaten. Because you've already faced the worst, the loss of yourself. And now you're back, sharper, stronger, scarred, but not scared. And that version of you, that version doesn't negotiate with disrespect. It doesn't explain itself to people committed to misunderstanding. It doesn't try to fit into rooms it's outgrown. It walks alone, not out of pride, but out of peace, out of clarity, out of the quiet, knowing that you do not need to prove anything anymore, because you've already proven it to yourself. And that's enough. You reach a point where silence becomes your loudest answer, where your stillness carries more weight than all the noise thrown at you, where the battles people try to drag you into feel small, not because they're easy, but because you've outgrown the need to engage. That's what ruthlessness refineses. It doesn't make you a villain. It makes you immune to being baited. You stop giving energy to every slight, every rumor, every fake smile hiding a knife. You stop dissecting people's intentions. You don't need to know why someone betrayed you anymore. It's enough that they did. And that knowledge alone is your exit ticket. No confrontation, no explanation, just absence, swift and surgical. That's the kind of decision-making the world fears. The kind where you vanish without warning because you no longer see value in staying. And that's the key shift from reaction to decision. You don't react when people provoke you. You decide how much access they have. You don't react to disrespect. You decide what energy gets your attention. You don't react to being underestimated. You use it because now being overlooked is leverage. They won't see you coming, and by the time they do, it'll be too late. Machiavelli knew that those who announce their power are rarely the ones who hold it. The most dangerous people are quiet until it's time not to be. They let others talk, they let others assume. And then they strike, not to harm, but to end the game completely. One move, no comeback, no apology, just finality. That's the real edge of ruthlessness, not destruction, but precision. And you develop that precision by unlearning the behaviors that made you weak. You stop thinking you owe people anything just because you shared a past. You stop seeking validation in conversations that always leave you empty. You stop lowering your standards because someone else's potential looks promising. You stop handing out discounts on your energy. Because here's the truth. When you were at your most broken, you tolerated things that the real you never would. You laughed at jokes that hurt. You nodded along to people who disrespected you. You kept friendships that felt more like silent competitions. You tried to keep peace while sacrificing your own. And you wore it all like armor, hoping if you just stayed kind enough, small enough, agreeable enough, the world would finally stop throwing punches. But it didn't. Because the world doesn't back down when you surrender. It backs down when you fight back with silence, with standards, with space. And that's what you've learned now. You don't fight fire with fire. You fight it by removing the oxygen, the attention, the availability, the emotional response. And suddenly the flames have nowhere to go. That's real control. And it's terrifying to those who once fed on your reactions. So now you keep your circle tight, your priorities tighter. You don't give away your vision in conversation anymore. You build in silence. You move with intent. And when people ask you what you're up to, you give them exactly what they deserve. Just enough to confuse them. Never enough to prepare them. Because not everyone deserves front row seats to your evolution. And when you do open up, it's no longer from a place of need. It's from choice. Because you've stopped bleeding for those who wouldn't even hand you a bandage. You've stopped venting to people who only listen for weaknesses they can use later. You've stopped asking people to understand a journey they were never meant to walk with you in the first place. That's the core of being ruthless, not cruel to others, but finally loyal to yourself. It's the moment you realize that protecting your peace is worth being misunderstood, that walking away is better than being tolerated, that your standards are not too high. They're just too expensive for the wrong people. And that's when the internal shift becomes external. People start noticing the lack of access, the lack of performance, the lack of apologies for simply being who you are. And they call it ego, they call it coldness, they call it selfish, but they'll never call it weak again. You don't need to convince them otherwise. Let them speak, let them judge, let them speculate. Because while they're doing that, you're building quietly, consistently, like a storm gathering power where no one's looking. Because now your goal isn't to be liked, it's to be undeniable, to be so rooted in who you are that nothing sways you, not flattery, not insults, not false promises, and especially not fear. That's when you become untouchable, because you've stopped looking outward for permission and started looking inward for precision. You begin to speak less, observe more, move smarter. You stop explaining your process to people who've never built anything. You stop asking for feedback from those who only critique from the sidelines. You stop dimming your light for those still stumbling in the dark. You realize most people feel uneasy, not because you changed, but because they didn't. And the deeper you go, the more peace you find in the quiet. Not loneliness, but solitude. Not isolation, but independence. You see, you don't need the crowd anymore. You need direction. You don't need noise. You need momentum. And you don't need anyone's belief because you already believe in yourself. That's when the old you dies for good. The one who over-explained, over-apologized, waited, hoped, begged to be seen. That version gets buried beneath every choice you make. Discipline over distraction, boundaries over comfort, purpose over approval. And in its place, something else rises. Not louder or flashier, but clearer and sharper. A you that doesn't flinch at loss, doesn't panic in solitude, doesn't tremble in uncertainty. Because you faced the worst, your own self-doubt. And you didn't just survive it. You weaponized it, turned it into clarity, fuel, the very thing that makes you unbreakable. You either break or become ruthless. But once you've tasted what it means to choose yourself fully, not out of spite, but strength, you never go back. You never trade silence for noise again. You don't hand out explanations like gifts to those who never earned them. You don't shrink to make others feel tall. And most of all, you refuse to let the world decide who you are, because now you do. Every step, every standard, every move on your terms.